Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are doing the last video of the aviation series of Past the Developer stuff for December 2021, and now we have a look at the scraps. So first off, we have the Mitsubishi RF-4EJ Phantom II, then the General Dynamics F-16A ADF for Italy, then the Dassault Mirage 2000C for France, and then of course the F-4-2000 Super Phantom for Israel. So we're going through all these four. This will be the last video on the aviation stuff, and then we'll get into the naval stuff, because there's a ton of that as well, and of course all of the more ridiculous machines have also got past there. Hope you've enjoyed this series of videos. They've been a lot of work and also kind of annoying to go through, so we'll have to see if I decide to do it next month or not. The story of this other Japanese Phantom, the RF-4EJ Phantom II, starts in 1972, where the JASDF decided that the 501st Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron's unarmed RF-86Fs were to be replaced with some newer unarmed vehicles, the RF-4Es. They were going to be replaced by 12 of them, made obviously by McDonnell Douglas. These RF-4Es were introduced in 1974 and would go on to exclusively operate within the 501st, and by 1990, 2 of these RF-4Es had been lost in accidents, and it was decided to procure an aircraft to both replace the attrition losses of the 501st, as well as complement the RF-4Es in service. This aircraft selection was looked at, and they decided that they were going to use surplus F-4EJs built by Mitsubishi. And at this point in time, the F-4EJ Kai was beginning to enter service, and it was decided to incorporate some of the changes into these F-4EJs that were to be assigned to the 501st. These aircraft were to be designated the RF-4EJ, and with the RF-4EJ retaining a majority of the equipment found on the F-4EJ, including the radar, the AN/APQ-120, and also it was equipped with something new, the JASN-4 inertial navigation device, as well as the JAPR-6 radar warning receiver. For its primary role of reconnaissance, 3 pods were developed with new center pylon stations. The pods were called the LORAP, the TAC, and also the TACER pods. The LORAP pod was designed in particular with a strategic photo reconnaissance in mind, with an obliquely mounted KS-146A camera capable of photographing an object 98 kilometers away with the width of a meter. The TAC pod was tailored as a general purpose pod and has a KA-95B high altitude camera. The D500 medium-low altitude camera, as well as a KS-135A low-altitude camera mounted facing down and forward. The TACER pod was in fact an electronic intelligence pod, and it was capable of intercepting radar signals, recording signals, and identification of those signals as well. And an RF-4EJ was equipped with a TACER or a TACER would then coordinate via data link with other units to attack the source of the signals. Unlike the RF-4E before it, the RF-4EJ retained combat capabilities, but to which extent is not entirely clear. It is safe to assume, though, that due to the new center fuselage pylon, the aircraft lost its associated wing for weaponizing the center pylon. The aircraft retains its nose-mounted 20mm, the JM61A1, as well as the ability to mount the AIM-9 Sidewinders or the AAM-3s. Photographic evidence also shows that the AIM-7 Sparrow nacelles were retained, and the F-4EJ modification ran through 1991 until 1993, with a planned 17 aircraft converted in total. The first aircraft took flight on the 4th of February 1992, but due to budget cuts, the order was reduced to 15. Unit number 2 through unit number 8 were only capable of mounting the LORAP pods and lacked the JASN-4 and the JAPR-6 radar warning receiver as a cost-saving measure. The RF-4EJ would serve alongside the RF-4E and the 501st until its retirement on the 9th of March 2020. And initially, it was planned to have the RF-4E and EJ to be replaced by modified F-15s. However, Toshiba, the contractor manufacturer of the new F-15 reconnaissance pods, reported that they were unable to provide that was required by the JASDF, and the program was unfortunately terminated. Due to the lack of replacement, the 501st Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron, after 59 years of operation, was disbanded on the 14th of March 2020. The last JASDF Phantom in service as of this post are the 301st Tactical Fighter Squadron of the F-4EJ Kais, slated for replacement by F-35As in the near future. So these vehicles could be in-game, with obviously limited armament on them, and also the addition of some quite interesting ideas. We'll have to see if they ever do come. The Italians have an offering in the form of the F-16A ADF and also some other variants of the F-16 as well. Basically, during the early 90s, Italy was operating a bunch of F-104 variants and they wanted to replace them. The general idea of replacing them was to replace them with the Eurofighter. But the problem with it is that the Eurofighter was postponed many different times. There was a bunch of delays with it, and therefore Italy wanted to basically fill the gap between the Eurofighter being available and the extinction of the F-104. So what they decided to do is, first of all, they leased some Tornado ADV fighters from the UK, and they were pretty good. They worked admirably, but once their service was over, they wanted to initially lease them again for another 10 years, but unfortunately the cost was too high for what they were getting. So they went to America and asked them, what can we do? And on the 15th of March 2001, the Italian government signed a contract for a 5-year lease of 34 F-16s and 4 spare airframes for parts. This deal was worth $777 million at the time, over a 10-year period, and the aircraft were delivered between July and November 2003 to 2004. The total amount of aircraft, so it had 30 F-16A ADFs, 1 F-16B ADF, and 3 F-16B Block 5s, and also 10s. So technically, Italy could get 4 separate types of F-16 if it wanted. I'm sure they would be completely different from each other in generally how it would play. Now, because these F-16s were more designed for scramble and intercept, one of the things that they never equipped was stuff such as the ground ordnance, so stuff like bombs, rockets, and so on and so forth. But they technically would be able to because, they were variants which could have held these things. But instead, they had access to stuff like AIM-120, the AMRAAM, and also stuff like the AIM-9Ls, the all-aspect sidewinders. They also had access to the M61 Vulcan, which you all know and love in the game, and also were powered by the Pratt & Whitney F100-220E engine, which of course is pretty powerful. Overall, this vehicle could fit in many different tech trees, since many different nations have used it, including Italy and of course many others. At some point, I'm sure we'll have an update where basically it'll just be called F-16, and it'll be very similar to the F-104 one, where everybody gets one, and we'll have to see how they do. The French get the Mirage 2000C, and this vehicle Doesn't have a huge article to it, just basically a bunch of pictures. The first flight of the Mirage 2000C happened on the 20th of November 1982, and it was actually delivered to the armed forces on starting in April 1983, and then entered service in 1987. And after 11 years, Dassault completed the contract work on the production of the Mirage 2000C. It ended up building 136 of them for the French Air Force. It was seen as a very maneuverable plane and also was exported all over the world. By 1990, the company had received orders from Abu Dhabi, Egypt, Greece, India, and even Peru. And when you have a look at why, this thing was powered by the turbofan Snecma M53P2, which meant that it had a maximum speed of Mach 2.2, which was pretty impressive. When it came to the armament, it had the standard French set of two 30mm DEFA 5.54 guns with 125 rounds per gun. It had 9 hardpoints, 5 under the fuselage and 4 under the wing, and could carry 2 Super 530s or a bunch of rockets in the form of F-4s or 68mm rockets, bombs. It could carry some 990 kilo ones, and also GBU-24s and GBU-12s. It could also carry some external 30mm as well to come along with it. This vehicle is kind of touted as the next big step for France when it comes to the game. Even though it is relatively modern, I'm sure we'll see it eventually. So now that Israel's in the game, they now get some stuff passed to developers, and they start off with the F-4-2000. This is known as the Super Phantom. Now, when it comes to Israel, since 1967, they'd actually been operating F-4EJ Phantom IIs. They used them as air superiority fighters in Israeli airspace. And by the 1980s, one of the problems was they were still using them, and they were kind of outdated. Obviously, being in service for around about 15 to 20 years, there was a lot of evolution at the time when it come to aviation. And when you compare that to other nations, they were probably in a little bit of a rough patch. So they decided, right, we're going to take these F-4EJ Phantoms that we've had before, and we are going to improve them. So instead of buying new stuff, let's improve the old. And the Israeli Air Force, along with the Israeli aerospace industry, launched a massive improvement project to upgrade not just the engines of the Phantom, but also the avionics. They took one of the Phantoms, which was numbered at 334, and they replaced the old J79 turbojet engine with another, which was lighter, smaller, and also stronger, the Pratt & Whitney PW1120 turbofan engine. And then, in July of 1986, it completed its first test flight with one of the new PW1120s, and then in 1987, the 334 Phantom flew with both PW1120 engines and achieved much better performance compared to the old. It actually found that it was a 21% reduced takeoff distance on test flights, improved fuel consumption, 11 to 13% improvement in the sustained turn rate, and a 30 to 36% increase in climb rate. So obviously very, very nice. It also had an increased cruise speed as well, making it possible to reach supersonic speed without the use of the afterburner. And then when it came to the avionics, obviously, they decided to add a few different things. The old control stick and throttle were replaced with a HOTAS system, obviously the hand-on throttle and stick throttle, and they also upgraded the old mission system to the MIL-STD 1553B standard data bus system and replaced the radar and Northern UTC's ANA PG-76 multi-mode radar. Elbit also applied for a licensed production model of the Kaiser multifunction HUD, which would significantly increase its situational awareness. But despite all of this, despite the high performance, Israel's defense ministry cut its budget and then cancelled the upgrade. And the IAI offered several countries the improved project, but nobody wanted it. So the reason why Israel's defense ministry stopped the project was because it had already rolled out the F-15 and F-16s, and the buying of new weapons was more effective than the existing project to upgrade old aircraft. So guess what? They decided to get new stuff instead, which is generally what you do anyway. So unfortunately, even though this Phantom had improved characteristics, improved avionics, and it also could carry Sidewinders, Chaffreers, and Pythons, could also carry Sparrows, and all of this wonderful things. At the end of the day, what happened was it never went anywhere, and they just bought new stuff. So that's the story of the Super Phantom, never really to see the light of day. As always, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orangetail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Barine, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.